I'm John Batchelor. This is the John Batchelor Show. And Christina Lake Cannabis, Christina Lake, British Columbia. I welcome Joel Dumaresq, the CEO and director of Christina Lake Cannabis, to introduce us to a whole new understanding of cannabis in Canada. Canada is a state that's made a turn. Some parts of the United States have made this turn, but all of Canada's made this turn. Christina Lake's Cannabis is registered with Health Canada. That's the Department of Health in Ottawa. This is a registered, regulated business, and it's prospering, and you understand why. Cannabis and cannabis oils are extremely popular and growing. At the same time, there's lots of competition across Canada because of the change that the government has made. However, Christina Lakes has a unique story, and I call upon Joel to help me tell it. Joel, congratulations and good evening. You're traded in the U.S. as CLCFF. In Canada, you're traded as CLC. It's ChristinaLakesCannabis.com. And if they go to that site, they can see a drone shot of your facility, your enterprise. 32 acres under cultivation now, projecting 99 more acres in the future. What is special about Christina Lake Cannabis? Why is it outdoor and not indoor, as I've witnessed in other enterprises? What is magic about Christina Lake? And tell me where it is. Good evening to you, Joel.
Good evening, John, and thanks for having me on with your listeners. It's a real pleasure to be with you. Christina Lake is, as you suggested, it's in south central British Columbia, just up above the Washington state border. For any of your listeners who know where Spokane, Washington, it's about 150 kilometers north of Spokane, Washington. And the location is really quite critical for us because it's the driest climate within Canada, almost desert-like in the summer with temperatures up into the high 80s and low 90s. And that's very, very conducive to growing cannabis outdoors, as we do. The other elements that make it ideal for growing cannabis is that we have a very, very rich soil. There's a river that runs right alongside Christina Lake called the Kettle River. And the Kettle River almost every year floods. And the floodplain has created a very, very rich soil that ideally suited to the growing of cannabis. And then the third element that I often tell people about is that we have very high winds through the valley where our operation sits. And what happens with those high winds is that they tax our plants. So if you can imagine, we have you mentioned 32-acre facility. We have 25,000 plants that are outdoors during the grow season. And as the wind blows through, the root structure has to get even more complex in order for those plants to be able to withstand the wind. And the stalk of the plant, basically the trunk of the plant, grows bigger and bigger. And what that enables is that the plant can carry much more flower than an indoor plant or a greenhouse-grown plant. It's an absolutely ideal location for growing cannabis.
Joel, I want to go farther into why Christina Lakes works so well for you. You talk about the precipitation, you talk about the temperatures, but if I understand correctly, cultivation also requires the right amount of sunshine, especially a great deal of sunshine, and some protection from the winters. Do you have that as well at your facility?
We grow during the summer season, so our crop grows from late May, early June through to the beginning of October. And because we're doing this on such a large commercial scale, John, we're able to grow as much in one season as an indoor producer or a greenhouse producer might be able to do with 2 or 3 crops over the course of a year. So it's a tremendous advantage being able to grow on this large a scale. And of course, as you point out, we're growing under the sun. So it's a very natural product that we're growing. We're very proud of that. The fact our product doesn't have fertilizers. It doesn't have insecticides in it. It's all naturally sun-grown and watered by the environment. So that provides us with a very, very robust, high-quality product. But it also provides us with a very, very low-cost product. So in comparison to the indoor producers and the producers, which are the vast majority of production across Canada and quite frankly throughout your country down south as well, in comparison to them, our costs are as little as 5 or 10% of what those players are producing at. So we're seeing the industry already starting to transform here in Canada, where many of the indoor producers are shutting down production because they've recognized that the outdoor product is natural, it's high quality, and that there's no way that they can actually compete with the outdoor product from a price standpoint.
Joel, how does it winter? How does cannabis winter in these conditions?
Well, cannabis doesn't winter in these conditions, quite frankly. If you were up in Christina Lake right now, it would be probably right around freezing, so quite cold at this time of year. So what we do is our plants are indoors at this time of year. So we start them as seeds and clones, and we develop them. We have a very sophisticated operation for the development of our plants. Our genetics are ideally suited to the outdoors. In fact, the four founders of the company were growing cannabis in what we refer to as the legacy industry, which was the industry that existed before legalization here in Canada. And they have almost 25 or 30 years of experience, John, in developing very, very robust genetics for the outdoor environment. And what they do is we carry those genetics through the winter indoors. We start cloning them so that we have sufficient plants to grow on the scale that we're growing. And we move them outdoors, as I said, late May, early June, into pots in the ground. And if you can think of it, we have 30,000 plants, individual plants that are outside. And we grow them all in individual pots because that allows us to more accurately control the watering of the plants and the nutrition of the plants. But it also provides, in COVID terms, if you can think of it, some social distancing. So what that ensures is that we don't have to worry about things like pests and insects that could cause damage to the crop. So there's some tremendous advantages to growing outdoors that you wouldn't naturally experience when you're growing indoors. And one of the things that you mentioned while I'm thinking of it at the outset was the drone and the drone shot. We were, to the best of my knowledge, the first in Canada to incorporate drone technology into the actual management of our operation in Christina Lake. So what we have is we have drones that sit in the middle of our fields, and on a set predetermined program, these drones take off and they canvass the entire field. If we were to do this by foot, if we sent workers out into the field, it would take tens and tens of hours to make sure that the plants are being properly watered and so on, whereas we can do this with drones in minutes. So they fly the entire field, they send back a thermal image to our head office, and we can analyze it and make sure that there's no areas of our field that aren't getting watered and that type of thing. So what we're doing is also employing high technology into the development of our outdoor genetics.
Geeky question. You're producing cannabis oil, distillate, and isolate. What does that mean, Joel?
So what we do is we're first and foremost, that's where our expertise was, but we also have a processing facility. So we built a world-class custom process facility where it's a pharmaceutical grade facility, which is required in Canada under Health Canada regulations, which you mentioned. And what this facility allows us to do is it allows us to process the cannabis. As the cannabis is taken out of the field, it's brought into the building. We run it, is called an extractor system. The extractor system, which is based on CO2, extracts the oil out of the cannabis. So it extracts THC oil out of the cannabis, which is where the real value is in cannabis. And that THC oil can be taken to what we call a winterized oil. The winterized oil might go into things like vapes, vape pens, that type of product. We can also take it even further down the spectrum to what we call a distillate. And distillate, which can either be in a oil form or in a powder form, goes into things like cannabis 2.0 products. So when you hear about edibles, it would go into edibles. When you hear about topical lotions, those types of things, it could go into those types of products and what are known as tinctures for like sleep, for improving sleep, and all of those types of applications. So we develop various different products that we then market and sell to other people in the industry that are making specified products out of it.
Joel, final question right now, because this is in development. I'm just learning from you right now. There's excitement momentarily. You never know. There's excitement in New York about cannabis stocks in Canada, in the United States, anywhere they are. It's a long time coming. The puzzle here is, how is cannabis doing in Canada? Does the government, having embraced it, does the government help? Does the government promote? Does the government say it made a good decision?
Well, the way I equate the cannabis industry in Canada is very similar to how the internet developed. If you can remember back to the late 90s, early 2000s, the internet was introduced. People started to use email. With the first phase of the internet, you had a lot of companies that found some success initially, but did things wrong and didn't get quite the plan right. And then you had a correction in around 2002, 2003, where a lot of those companies sold off. A lot of them disappeared. If you can think of something like AOL,
Sure.
American Online, completely disappeared. But then they resurfaced, and the companies that resurfaced went on to much greater heights. And that's what's happened in Canada. So we had an initial flurry of companies that came out 2, 3, 4 years ago in advance of legalization in Canada, John. Those companies had kind of a fantastic meteoric rise, but then they had a correction. But now what's come out of that are much stronger, better developed companies such as our own Christina Lake Cannabis. And these companies have a much better sense of costs. They're paying much closer attention to the bottom line. The industry is better developed now in Canada. There's more demand. There's better products on the shelves. And so that's all feeding into us and creating the demand and the interest, not only in our products, but also in our stock. And I think that's what's attracting a lot of that attention that we're starting to see the market for many of these cannabis stocks.
ChristinaLakeCannabis.com. Christina, by the way, is the daughter of the Hudson Bay trader who lived in this area once upon a time. Christina Lake Cannabis. It's traded in the U.S. as CLCFF, in Canada as CLC. Joel Dumaresq is the CEO and director. And I'm John Batchelor, and this is The John Batchelor Show.